All right, everyone. I think if you could make your way back to your table, we're going to go ahead and get started. As you all have seen the program, we have a very robust day, and so I want to try to stay on track as best as possible. So while you're wrapping up getting your breakfast and wrapping up your conversations, please head back to your table. One note that I do have all throughout today, the speakers and their presentations, if you do want copies of those, so many of you had already asked for Robert's presentation. Josh Palma with Flower Mound, please see him. He's just right over here in the blue quarter zip. He will get your contact information and he'll send you those presentations. So please feel free to contact Josh or connect with him throughout the day for those presentations. Staying on track here, I do want to now welcome Dr. Natasha Solle. And Dr. Natasha is from the University of Miami, and she is going to be speaking with us today on an overview of Sylvester's Firefighter Cancer Initiative, highlighting the last decade of research and update on current projects and what's next for FCI and the science of cancer in the fire service. Please give a round of applause to Dr. Natasha Solle. Oh, you have a microphone. Perfect.
Oh, no, he said this is just for online, so I did
Understood.
Double mic'd.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? Thank you so much for having me. So as she mentioned, I am from University of Miami and the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, and I have been serving as the Deputy Director of the Firefighter Cancer Initiative for the last 11 years. So I'm really excited to be here. I see some familiar faces in the audience, and we've been working with partners and collaborators in Texas for several years now, but happy to share some of the work for those of you who maybe have never heard of the work that we are doing all the way down in South Florida. So today I'm going to be giving you an overview, talk about our surveillance, some of our biomonitoring program, as well as our cancer screening and education, and our wellness clinic. So just acknowledgments as far as our funding and how we are funded. We are primarily funded through the state of Florida, through a state appropriation. We've also received external funding through the NIH, through NIOSH, through FEMA, as well as the NCI. So a little bit of background about the Firefighter Cancer Initiative and how this got started. So back in 2015, we had firefighters come to us at the Cancer Center. So this was not an idea that we had as scientists. We were all really doing other work in different areas. I was really focused on women's health and cancer prevention and education. Our PI, Dr. Aaron Kobetz, was really leading a way in early screening and prevention, but more in health disparities. And the other deputy director, Dr. Cabal Martinez, he had a background in occupational health, but was at that point really researching construction workers. So none of us were even looking at firefighters. But this is really community-based participatory research at its finest. So firefighters literally came knocking on our door and said, we have a problem. We had 2 different departments come and say, we're seeing our men and women getting cancer at an increasing rate, and we know something's going on. The issue is we don't have any science to back it up, and we need an academic partner. And will you guys do this? And so at first we were kind of very, what is this? Did some research, did some literature reviews, and said, something's there. And at that point, that's when we looked to the state of Florida and the University of Miami government relations team and see how we could get some funding to really understand what these risks are in the fire service and then what we can do about them to lower their risk. Sitting at the table with us has been our firefighters throughout the entire time, and still to this day, sitting shoulder to shoulder with us at the table when we're either coming up with a research question, how we're designing questionnaires, how we're looking at interventions, and then really how we disseminate that out to the fire service. I'll tell you a story just recently. Every year we meet with our advisory board, and it's us as far as like a group of scientists and then a group of firefighters. And one scientist shared an idea and said, this is amazing. Everyone agreed. It sounded like it'd be perfect. And the firefighters were like, that would never work. No one would ever do that. And so it's really great that we have those partnerships there, because if it's not going to work for your community, then there's no sense in us trying to do it scientifically. So I'm going to share a video with you just of a high overview. Last year was a big year for us. We celebrated our 10 years, and so we were able to put together just a quick overview of some of the work that we've done. That way, maybe? There we go. Are you able to do the sound?
So how long have you been with this organization?
So I've been at University of Miami, seems like forever, really all of my academic career. I did my training at University of Miami for nursing, and then I went and did my PhD there. And then really this started when I was in my postdoc. So all of my training has really been through the Cancer Initiative. The other thing I can share while we're waiting, I know, the next slides after this is talking about where we sit within the University of Miami, and we sit within the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. And I thought it was really important, the previous speaker talking about an NCI designated cancer center and what does that mean. So in Florida, we are the only NCI designated cancer center in South Florida, one of 3, and we are in the network of the 73 other NCI designated cancer centers. And so why is that important? So you're really held at a higher standard if you're part of this group of NCI designated cancer centers. The most up-to-date treatments, as far as, not just treatments, but also clinical trials. So really staying on the cutting edge of any of the work that we're doing. So as he's figuring this out, I think we can go and move on to the next slides. And if it works, we can come back, and it's not a big deal if it's out of order at all. It's not working now.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so yeah, you can see we're situated there. There we go. We're getting there. Okay. So let's talk about the U.S. Fire Service workforce. And so this is really important to us because what we know is that, not every firefighter is the same. So it's estimated just over 1 million firefighters, both career and volunteer, in the United States, with the majority of them at 65% as volunteer firefighters. We know that 7% are female and 51% are between the ages of 30 and 49. And when we look at the firefighter workforce, we know that there's several groups. And this is something we've really focused on in the last few years, to not only study your typical structural firefighters, but look at these subgroups and how their risk may be different, including our volunteer firefighters, our wildland, our USAR firefighters, as well as our fire investigators and fire inspectors. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little about some projects that we've completed in the last year, really focusing on these different groups as well as ongoing research. So we'll talk a little bit, I think you heard a little bit already, and I think any cancer symposium or talk you go to about firefighters, you're going to hear about the monograph 132. So this was released in December of 2023, and what this is, it's a group of scientists that come together every 10 years, and they're able to pull all the research and all the data that has happened in those 10 years to then identify where an occupation sits as far as their cancer risk. And so to give you a little bit of background, before 2023, the last time they met in regards to firefighters was in 2010, and they had classified the job and the occupation of firefighting as a 2B, meaning possibly carcinogenic to humans. Since then, not only us, but several other researchers across the country and globally have been doing work in this space of cancer in the fire service. And with that, there was significant data showing that firefighters are an increased risk. And now firefighters, you can see on the far left in that red box, they're now classified as a group 1 carcinogen. Same as it considering like on par with being tobacco smoke, that it is a carcinogen. What they also shown in the monograph are increased risk for certain cancers or increased incidence. And so what we saw was increased incidence in mesothelioma, testicular cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, bladder cancer, colon cancer, thyroid, prostate, and skin melanoma, as well as kidney cancer. But you can see we put it in gray because it's not as, it wasn't as high as the other cancers. So I want to break it down and show you a little bit of how we're organized within the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. So you can see it's pretty broad, and one of the I think one of the most successful things that we have as our team is how interdisciplinary we are. So it's not, just one group. So we have scientists and doctors from public health sciences, from medicine, biochemistry, bioengineering, School of Communication, School of Education, coming together to study the risk of firefighters from different angles. We know that it's very multifactorial, so it's not just exposure, it's not just nutrition, it's not just sleep, it's all of these things and how we can bring them together. And so we've really broken our projects up into these 6 main pillars, but we have several studies within each of these pillars. So in any given year, we have about 40 research projects that are going on that fit within these groups. So starting with our epidemiology and cancer registry, which I'll share with you some of the work there, our environmental exposure sampling program, which is led by our team of biochemists, and that's really looking at what firefighters are exposed to. So looking at, what's in the air around them, really collecting aerosol collection, water samples, soil samples, and that's really paired closely with our occupational environmental biomonitoring group, because now they're looking at the biologicals of the firefighters. So, okay, we took air samples and we know that there's this compound in the air, but now we want to know how is that impacting the firefighter. So at the same time, collecting blood samples, urine samples, toenail samples to see how those are connected. Is it being absorbed into the body, and how long does it take to metabolize out of the body? Cancer screening, education, and survivorship. So this is the pillar that I lead, so we'll talk a little bit about some of the programs we've created there at the state and national level. We have our firefighter prevention and wellness clinic, and then our leadership program. And so all of these are tied, these programs, how we can change practices within the fire service and also policy, both at the local, state, and national level. So I'm going to start out with sharing with you some of the work that our epidemiology team has done. So what you see here is the Florida Cancer Data System. This is our cancer registry in the state of Florida. And every state has a cancer registry. So cancer is a reportable disease. Anyone who gets diagnosed with cancer, it has to be reported to your state registry. And so what we did is we created a linkage between our cancer registry and the state fire marshal's office. So we were able to get de-identified information and then link them. So what does that do? That actually tells us what the real incidence of cancer was of our Florida firefighters. Rather than just waiting on self-report, we were able to go into the registry, link them to the same date of birth and last 4 digits of their Social Security, and get a incidence for the state. So by doing this, we were able to link firefighters in the state of Florida from 1981 to 2014. We're actually doing a relinkage right now, so by the end of this year, we will then have the last decade. And so what we were able to see was in our Florida firefighters, we had increased risk in our male firefighters of melanoma, prostate and testicular cancer, and thyroid cancer. And then for our women firefighters in the state of Florida, there was an increased risk of brain and thyroid cancer. And so you saw the 6 pillars, and so we very much work together, and they cross-pollinate over, so it's not that people are working in their silos. So we take the work that we're learning from this group, and then, you know, for example, for cancer education and screenings, we see that there's a higher incidence of these type of cancers within the state. How can we educate more on those? How can we increase screenings with these? And some of the papers that have come out from this, I'll get to the papers in 1 second. The other thing that's part of this EPI group is our cohort studies. We have several cohort studies. We're following different groups over time. So one of the first ones that we started was our annual cancer survey. And this was our first study. And it was really because at that time, no one was collecting real life data, or real-time data, I should say. Everything was retrospective. So it was either claims data or incidence data, but no one was collecting things prospectively. So we didn't know, what is the life of an active firefighter right now? You know, what is their medical history, their cancer history, what is their occupational history, what were their screening behaviors. And so we currently have over 4,000 firefighters nationally, and this was also allowing us to identify those gaps in screening. We learned very early on about melanoma and skin cancer from our sample here, and we found that compared to the general population, our sample of firefighters not only had a higher incidence of melanoma, but also were diagnosed at a much earlier age compared to the general population. We also learned that most firefighters were not seeing a dermatologist and having a full skin check. So that was something that we implemented, of, you know, having skin checks, and that's part of our outreach program. The other thing that came up, and these all come, you know, now we're on year 11, so it seems like we can show all these things, but these things all took time, which I think is really important to show, because I know a lot of groups that we're working with in different states and different departments, they want to implement these things, and they see a lot of this work and think, how are we going to do all this? And it took us a long time. And it took, again, feedback from firefighters of telling us, why don't you think about this? Why don't you add this? So around our 2nd or 3rd year, the firefighter said, it's great what you guys are doing with the annual cancer survey, but what about the retirees? You know, why aren't you asking questions about them? And they're the ones that are getting cancer, you know, within 5 years of their retirement. It's really important that you capture that. So that's what we've been doing. This one, we don't collect any biologicals. It's just a survey. But again, to get an idea and a broad picture of our retirees nationally. Then we have the fire cohort. This cohort is a representative sample of just Florida firefighters. And so we did this because we wanted to make sure it was a representative sample. And so what that means is we didn't want just those people who wanted to participate be the ones that participated. So we randomized all of the different departments in the state of Florida based on location and size, and included only those in this cohort. So it wasn't those people who are, super active and like, I'll take every survey, I'll do everything. We want to make sure we get enough people who maybe wouldn't just sign up, make sure that there's enough people from rural areas, volunteer departments, metro areas. And so this is what we've been working on the last couple years. With the fire cohort and the annual cancer survey, it's not just a survey, we also collect biologicals and follow them yearly. We have a SAFE cohort, so these were USAR members only that were part of the response team for the Surfside building collapse that happened a few years ago, which was right in our backyard. We went out there immediately the day of. We started collecting environmental samples, collecting biologicals, heavy metal exposure of these firefighters, and we also implemented a focus groups on mental health on this specific cohort. Our other cohort is our women's cohort study. It's only on Florida women firefighters, where we're looking at fertility markers, but also looking at environmental exposures such as pHs, and following these women over time. So some of the publications that have come out from our EPI program, one of them looking at lung cancer survival among Florida male firefighters, again looking at the incidence of those firefighters that were pulled from the data, Florida Cancer Data System from 81 to 2014. I'm not going to be able to see that far, but overall the take-home message from here is that the lung cancer survival is significantly higher among firefighters compared to with non-firefighters, and there's no significant difference between career and volunteer firefighters. And so this is something that comes up a lot because most people assume, oh, lung cancer must be really high in firefighters because of the smoke, and it's actually not. We actually see a much lower rate of lung cancer compared to the general population. And you can see in most national data, instance-wise, not just in the state of Florida, that lung cancer is low. Cancer risk and mortality among firefighters in a meta-analysis. So again, this is something a little bit different, where our EPI team pooled all the data that was out there at the time. So pooling any type of studies that they see, and what they found was that firefighters are at a higher risk for several cancers, including skin melanoma, other skin cancers, and prostate cancers, and they showed a higher mortality rate for rectum, testicular, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The last publication I'll share with you that our EPI team have done is a comparative analysis of histologic type of thyroid cancer between career firefighters and other occupational groups. We know thyroid cancer is high, so they wanted to get a better idea of what type of thyroid cancer. And so the take home here was that firefighters that were diagnosed with thyroid cancer experience higher odds of papillary compared to rare histological types of thyroid of other workers. So now I'm going to share with you a little bit of the work of our ESP team, our environmental sampling program, and our biomonitoring. So some of the work that they've done over the last few years has been pretty incredible. So one on the far you see is passive sampling methods of exposure identification. So they had been looking at how can we find an easy way to really assess and quantify the amount of different compounds that firefighters are exposed to. We can't impact what they're doing at the scene. We can't put things on their gear. And so what we've been doing is, the Livestrong silicone wristbands, they're able to wear those. And what you don't know is when you put them under a microscope, it's very porous. There's many tiny holes. So polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, which are the most common compounds that come off burning materials, are able to be then soaked into those silicone wristbands, and we're able to see one, the type of pHs firefighters are being exposed to, and the amount of it. And so we've done this several times. I'm going to give a couple more examples of some of the studies, but that's one type of sampling that they've worked on. They've engineered early warning VOC sensors, so you can see those little blue things, detection of VOCs in active fire response. They've done evaluation of firefighters' internalized carcinogenic exposures. The other thing, another study, we looked at the assessment of firefighting foams and how that makes an impact on human cells. And lastly, looking at VOC's exposure in our female firefighters. So specifically, we've been looking at the vaginal region and giving women self-sampling. So not only are they self-sampling for HPV, but they're also able to self-sample for these pHs, which we know are around them and carcinogenic. So I'm going to share with you a couple examples. So one of them is our environmental characterization of health hazards in occupational settings, which we call the ECHO studies, which we focused on with our volunteer firefighters. And so we wanted to see the pH exposure among U.S. volunteer firefighters using, again, these silicone wristbands. So one was really to see, what the levels of pH were in U.S. In our volunteer firefighters. But the other piece of this and the objective of this was to facilitate citizen science. So we didn't go out into the field for this. What we did was we trained other volunteer firefighters to do the science. So they worked with our team. They got what we call city certification, which is to be able to conduct research. We trained them on it, and then they were able to carry it out. And so you can see here, so our study design, we recruited through department leadership. Any eligible participants who were over the age of 18, and verbal consent was obtained. As far as data collection, they completed a pre and post incident survey. They each had a wristband on their dominant wrist, and then our wristbands were extracted using GCMS to pull out the PAHs. So here's a breakdown of the demographics. So we had 16 states represented. So we had 16 champions, volunteer champions, who are the ones who actually carried out the research. 84% were male, 97% were white, and you can see a majority, 84%, were non-Hispanic. So here's some of the results as far as what we saw pH-wise. On the far left, you can see this heat map. So the darker the colors, the more pHs there were. The blue region is those who did not have a fire exposure. The pink region are those who did have a fire. So we still see a significant increase in pH levels for those that went to a fire exposure. And then you can also see the same thing, and we've broken it down by molecular weight of our pHs. So we know that there's more, as far as pHs go, there's more low molecular weight in the air. So overall, our conclusion here was that silicone wristbands were successful in capturing PAHs. Exposures were higher among those who respond to a fire incident. And then also this method demonstrates promise for a practical and scalable tool for monitoring carcinogens. The other one I want to share with you that our team did, focusing on health and safety, is our forward study. So again, I was sharing with you that we really wanted to look at different subgroups. So working with our forestry department in the state of Florida, our team did some focus groups to really understand what the challenges and risk of wildland firefighters are, and how we can inform mitigation strategies. There we go. All right, so our study objective, we were working with our forestry team. They would complete a pre-interview, have focus groups where they would sit, in groups of 8 to 10 people, and then we would, we would do the interviews, ask these questions, ask them on some of their challenges, and then see what themes came out of it. So the main topics we looked at was jobs of wildland firefighting, working in wildland and forest landscapes, perceived hazards at work, cancer risk for job exposures, healthcare access, and information needs of risk reduction. So some of our example questions included, can you describe what your normal week looks like? How do health and safety hazards vary across your landscapes? What types of health hazards do you encounter in the station? And what do you think about firefighters developing cancer because of their jobs? So with that, some of our results, we had 7 focus groups completed with 51 Florida Fire Service personnel with an average tenure of 11.5 years. From our pre-interview guide, 72% reported no respiratory protection during fireground activities. Health conditions reported including 24% hypertension, 12% arthritis, 9% asthma, 8% depressive disorder, 7% kidney disease, and 46% were obese. So this is, again, we do these things to get a clear idea of, what are we looking at as far as the workforce and who we're working with, and, what are other concerns they may have. So key themes that came out of this was theme 1, voicing safety, risk, and concerns in equipment operations. 2, understanding environmental exposures, chemical, vegetation, wildland, urban interface, driven risk. So this was something, one of their main concerns is, we don't know what's out there. Yes, it could be, it's wildland, but we don't know what's out there as far as it could be tires, it could be mattresses, things are out in the environment that it's not just clean air. 3 was addressing contamination risk and cultural norms in PPE and decon practices. You saw based on their survey, over 78% of them reported not using breathing apparatus or proper PPE. So it is something that is concerning for our wildland firefighters. And theme 4 is characterizing the pervasive and enduring health behaviors of wildland firefighters. So we do see that there's critical gaps in the occupational health practices within our wildland firefighters. So, a lot of the work that we do stems from qualitative research to get a better idea. And so now our next step with this is very similar to how we've done with our structural firefighters, of creating these cohorts where we follow them over time, collect biospecimens, have survey data on them. And by using what they have shared with us as key themes or key concerns, we're able to really tailor those questionnaires to address the gaps and the challenges that they have identified. So the next one I want to share with you is our FICO study. So we actually started this within the state of Florida and then received funding through FEMA to create a national cohort. Where we're looking at fire investigators. And this one's a little bit different than our typical cohorts, because not only are we looking at cancer risk, but we also are looking at cardiac, musculoskeletal, and mental health. Here's just a little bit of background on our fire investigators and why we thought it was so important to really look at a national sample. We know fire investigators are a very unique subgroup. Some of the things that have come out of why it's unique compared to our structural firefighters are, again, type of exposure, the PPE that is worn or not worn during investigation. Also, what we're seeing is the amount of time that they're at it is very different than our structural firefighters. Structural firefighters are in there with SCBA on, but for 15 minutes, where a fire investigator will be at an investigation for 30 minutes to 8 hours, or maybe several days, depending on the case. And so something that definitely came up, and then the same with fire inspectors. So when we started this, we wanted to, again, have a better idea of what research was already done in looking at this group. So here you can look at, this is based on data that was shown in 2022, that there's over 1,700 fire inspectors or fire investigators in the US. So again, looking at a workforce of over 1 million, it's a pretty small percentage. And then we looked at, what papers, when we start any type of project, this is the first thing we go to. We go to PubMed, which has all scientific papers that have been published in areas. So we looked at it and saw, okay, all published papers at that time was 35 million. Then we wanted to look at, of cancer papers, over 4 million. What about firefighter papers? At that point, a little over 4,000 scientific manuscripts have been published. When looking at fire investigator papers, only 19. And looking at fire investigator papers related to cancer, it was 1. So really an area that had not been studied yet. And the one scientific paper was looking at airway particles and their recommendations were that to protect investigators' airway from particulates when investigation activities are conducted, something should be worn. They were really looking at the PPE, but they really weren't looking at anything else beside that for cancer risk. So again, the way we start all of our studies is qualitative. And so we wanted to, with our fire investigators, not only ask them questions about what they perceive as health and safety risk and what they perceive as health and safety promotion. We had the idea, because we don't know a lot about their work activities, to use what we call photo voice. And so what that means is we ask the participants not only to share their experience with us through an interview, but also to take pictures of what they identify as health risk as well as health promotion. And so the inclusion to this study was that fire investigators had to be over the age of 18, active U.S. fire investigators, and willing to provide their health perceptions, as well as have a smartphone or device that can take pictures and be uploaded. As far as our study procedures, we would give them an overview of the study. We would do a verbal consent, a short questionnaire, and then share with them the directions on taking photos and uploading them. From there, once their photos were uploaded, then we had an interview with them, and they were able to share some of their concerns and any challenges, as well as health priorities. As far as our recruitment went, our goal was to make sure that we had participation throughout all of the regions, and so we had 56 fire investigators consented and 35 who completed all of the procedures, including interview and upload of photos. Here just shows a flow diagram of where, from those who were approached to those who completed. We did have a few people that were ineligible, either because they were retired or because they were international. So let's get into a little bit of, so those who were 35 active, 88% were male, with an average tenure of 12 years. And as far as the type of fire investigator, we had both public, private, law enforcement, and industrial that were represented. And so here are the main themes that came out. So as far as health promotion, they shared that it was intentional and self-driven, with sub-themes of proactive use of PPE, department infrastructure and policy development, and lifestyle practices, including nutrition and physical activity. And they identified their health risk as cumulative, prolonged, and often visible, including chronic chemical and carcinogen exposure, physical and mechanical hazards in post-fire environments, and psychological strain, trauma, and exposure and occupational stress. So our first theme, health promotion, is intentional and self-driven. We see our first sub-theme that supported this was proactive use of PPE, storage, and decontamination infrastructure. So I won't go through all the quotes, but you can see some of the things that they identified that they use really focused on PPE use, and that's how they identified health promotion. The other thing was storage and decon infrastructure. So you see there, a lot of them identified using wipes, using extractors, having storage containers where they're containing all of their gear, as well as any equipment to make sure they're not being exposed more than they need to be when they're traveling. Another part of the storage and decontamination infrastructure is having vehicles on site that use a closed cab system, so all of their equipment is on the outside. Also, the installation of the exhaust extractors, which many of them said doesn't really happen often for the fire investigator vehicles. So that was something that they saw within their department. The other thing is, we talk about that it being self-driven. So these are things that firefighters shared that they used for decon, but it was something that they did independently and not something that came from the department. So that was a big piece of some of the health promotion, specifically with fire investigators. Looking at sub-theme 2, using policy development, so NFPA 1321, so those who have identified it and said they are using these type of policies and standards to help guide their practices. The other theme that came out was lifestyle practices, nutrition, physical activity, stress management, saying that some departments have nutritional interventions for them where they're providing them meals, also having the availability of gym time and gyms at their departments, and then really focused on being able to do physical activity not only for the health aspect of it, but also for the stress management. So then looking at our second theme of health risk as cumulative, prolonged, and often invisible. First one was the chronic chemical and carcinogen exposure. Many of them focused on electric vehicle fires as being a new health risk. Also talking about seeing what's in different buildings that they're unsure of what it is. For example, this one says this building was posted as unsafe to occupy because of the toxins. We still had to go in and investigate. EV fires are some of the worst exposures we deal with. So really getting that real life experience that they're sharing. The other health risk that they identified was physical and mechanical hazards and post-fire equipment. So floors are compromised, nails are everywhere, ceilings are hanging, so safety aspect is a really big piece. And then lastly is the sub-theme of psychological strain and trauma exposure and occupational stress and fire investigation. So they said, you see some really bad things, people who didn't make it, and you're kind of put in a box and you move on, because if you carry it with you, you won't be able to do your next job. So we've taken this as our first step within our national cohort. We've been able to identify, what they saw as key challenges, high priorities, and have added that as part of our cohort study. Again, our cohort study is looking at not only cancer risk, but cardiovascular risk, musculoskeletal disorders, and mental health. And so that's why we asked specifically those questions on safety and risk, because not only are we worried about what their exposures are, but what may be affecting their body. So our goal is to consent and enroll 200 firefighters throughout the country. And some of our main procedures, again, will be a questionnaire at baseline. We'll follow them up yearly. We will also do a blood sample. I will go through all these instead of going through this small box because I can't see. You have your screener, so you have a blood draw, muscle and joint exam. They will be doing a wristband monitoring, saliva collection, toenail collection, and then also the option to use our personal exposure reporting app. Again, with some of the things that we'll be asking in the survey, sociodemographics, characteristics, occupational history, work exposure, sleep quality, overall healthcare access and utilization, cancer screenings, cardiovascular risk, joint and muscle conditions and pain, as well as mental health and behavioral health history. So from the blood samples, we will be taking a lipid panel, inflammation markers, cardiac biomarkers, blood sugar levels, and immune system function. For the saliva samples, we are looking at cotinine, cortisol, C-reactive protein, testosterone, so really looking at inflammation. With our toenail clippings, and this is something we've been doing with several of our cohorts, and people always want to know, why are you collecting their toenails? It seems kind of weird, but we are able to see long-term heavy metal exposure. And so with our toenails, since they grow slower than fingernails, you're actually able to see what you were exposed to in the last 3 months. And so we ask for toenail clippings every 6 months in several of our cohorts. And then here, as I was mentioning earlier, these are pictures of the silicone wristbands that we use. This is what they look like under a microscope. And so as you can see, as they're porous, you can really see how these things, these pHs can get stuck in there, so we can measure them. Our musculoskeletal exam, range of motion, grip strength, sit and reach, back scratch test, and a Romberg test for balance. So something that has come up specifically with our fire investigators is musculoskeletal injuries and chronic pain over time because of the crouching and crawling that they may do. So that's why this was added. And then our personal exposure reporter app. So we've actually created this since the very beginning in 2015. Each year we add more things. So this last year we just added wildland, and last year we added fire investigation. And so I know you guys were talking earlier about different app reporters, and we created this specifically again because no one really had the records and knowledge of what they had been exposed to over the years. And unfortunately, in the case where someone gets diagnosed with cancer, it's not, even if your state has a legislation, you have the cancer bill, it's not an easy thing. They want to see records that you were exposed and that it is an occupational cancer. And so this is something that we've created. You have your own everything that you've ever put in it, it's your dashboard. If you move states, if you move departments, it's all there. It's your own, and you're able to share that. And so what the PER collects is, the type of incident you were on, what did you do during that incident, what was burning, what did you do for decon, what symptoms did you have afterwards, and then you're able to track that. And we've made specific now sections for fire investigation and wildland firefighters. All of our cohort participants on the FICO study, but really in all of our studies, receive a report back letter personalized on their study findings. So participants have an understanding of what their results are and then how they compare to other people that are in their cohort. Okay, so now moving on to our cancer screening education survivorship program. Here's just a synopsis on some of the work that we've done. So one is our education. We've created a curriculum that shares what cancer risks are, how to mitigate those risks, give practical recommendations, and we present this work all the time, whether in person, online. We go to departments and share it with those who are incumbent firefighters. But we work very closely with our state fire marshal's office that it is now policy within the state of Florida that they receive this curriculum as part of going through the fire academy. This was something we talked about very early on. We were talking about cancer risk, and we were asking, when you're becoming a firefighter, did you know about this risk? And they said, no, it's not really talked about. Once they got on the job, they learned about it. So now it is something that as you're becoming a firefighter and you're going through the fire academy, there is a section on cancer risk. We've actually updated our education, so not only that we can go and deliver it in person, but it can be done independently, and you get a certificate of completion. As far as our cancer screenings, we've provided HPV self-sampling and PAH assessments for our women firefighters. We've developed a toolkit for peer-to-peer education, which I'll share with you a little bit more on. And then our survivorship study. So we actually just created a what to do, a diagnosis guide that's pretty extensive. And for the last 6 years, we've been working with cancer survivors for a 10-week intervention on cognitive-based stress management. So I'll share a little bit more about each of these studies. So here is and you can download it, it's free, anyone can use it. This goes through our full education curriculum. Every year we update it, so there's the most up-to-date literature. We really start giving them a background of, what is cancer in the fire service? What are the numbers that are out there? Why are firefighters at risk? So share with them the type of exposures, and then we talk about how they can decrease their risk at an organizational level. So, when you're working at a department, what you can do as far as decon, and then talk about modifiable risk factors and really what the individual can do, whether it be nutrition, stress management, sleep, physical activity, all of those type of things. So here's just another view of the different modules. It's broken down in 5 modules, and Chelsea from our team will be sharing some of this later in the afternoon about our cancer curriculum. Within the curriculum, we have several videos that we've created, resources that are outside of the university that can be used. We've also been able to award CEUs for completing this. The next thing we've created, and this again is totally free, we shared with our advisory board, some of the work we're doing, the ongoing projects, and they said, well, that's all great, but it'd be really, it'd be so much better if it was easier for us to access, that we didn't have to go searching for it. Is there any way you guys can create like an app? And that's what we did. So we have the Firefighter Cancer Initiative Toolkit. This has an overview, all of our active projects. We're able to look and say, like, oh, this would be great for my department. I can reach out to the University of Miami and see if it's something our team can join. Everything we've created as far as our education, so our curriculum, we have about 12 different PDF one-pagers that you're able to download and share. That focus on different cancer screenings and different risk. We have several videos, educational videos that we've created, looking at exposure, looking at decon, a step-by-step process. Those are all there. Cancer diagnosis, what to do. If someone is diagnosed with cancer, we have resources there, as well as our contact information. And so really everything that we're doing at any given point can be found on this toolkit. So to add to this, this is just something we started this year, based again on firefighters' feedback. Really, it's Chelsea and I and maybe a couple other people that go throughout the country to give the education and the talk, but we realized it would be a lot easier if we did something like we did with the volunteer firefighters. So let's train other firefighters, make them champions of the toolkit and the curriculum. And that's what we did. We put out an application process, and we had several firefighters apply for it. And out of those, we had 11 that were chosen based on their application and their experience. And, and it wasn't really experience. It was really about those who wanted to do it. People asked, like, do I have to be a chief or do I have to do this? And it's really not. It was really any firefighter who showed the passion that they wanted to be a part of it. And so what we've done is we have trained them on research and education, and we've shared with them everything. And so they now are, going out. They actually start this month. The whole first half of the year was the training aspect. They receive our physical toolkit, which has all the contents that are in the toolkit, the app toolkit, but printed out. And it's actually in a physical toolbox that these fellows will take out and bring them to their department, and they will deliver a modified version of our cancer education curriculum. Some of the things that we've created that were a little different than what you see in the toolkit. There you've got shower hangers that show directions on self-testicular and self-breast exams that can be left at the fire stations. We have our cancer screening posters. We have information on our nurse navigation. We give them sunscreen. We've created a recipe book specifically for firefighters. Around the table, you guys may see our screening guide, and then as well as our what to do at diagnosis. So moving on to our cancer survivorship, I wanted to share one of the papers that we have published. It was a mixed method study. Again, you see the trend. We start with qualitative. We really want to get a better understanding of what the needs are of our group and our population. And so we had done interviews and focus groups with cancer survivors. So this one included 29 active and retired firefighters who had been diagnosed with cancer. Not only did we collect interview data, but we also did survey data. That's why you see it's a mixed methods. And what our take home here is that firefighters are requesting curated resources such as support groups and department training, supporting the need for more cancer survivorship resources specific to firefighters. And so that's what we did. We created the Cancer Survivorship Intervention. It's a 10-week program, small groups of up to 6 firefighters. They complete it online as a group with a person. It's not just computerized. And they go through this cognitive-based stress management program. And it's specifically tailored to the needs of what firefighters identified as their biggest challenges. Because going back to being a firefighter after a cancer diagnosis is very different than going back to being a banker or sitting at a desk. Not only the physical aspect of it is that you're going back to a very physically demanding job, but also the mental aspect of it, of going back to a job that you got cancer from, and now you're going back to it. So really focusing on that return to work. Also, a big piece of it is the stress management and how to work through some of those things. A lot of the firefighters that we work with said, anytime I was stressed, I would exercise or I would go for a run. Well, they can't do that at that point when they're going through treatment. So sharing with them different ideas of how they can deal with those stresses, how they communicate, not only with family and colleagues, but also, questions that they should be asking their union leadership or their chiefs on, what is offered within their state. And so this is a national a study that we've been doing. Okay, so our last piece is our cancer prevention and wellness clinic. So again, we started this in 2019 as a brick and mortar. Realized very quickly that firefighters want to come in person to their stations. So we created a mobile clinic, and we've been able to now have 2 mobile clinics that go out. We actually contract with fire departments, and we do their annual physicals and then refer them for cancer screenings. Again, realizing that cancer is not their only concern. We do a fully comprehensive exam with them, looking at injuries, chronic disease, sleep, exposures, infectious disease, women's health. So not only focusing on cancer. So let me just go through this because I know we're at time. So here you can see the inside. We were able to purchase 2 Sprinter vans, turn them into actual clinical spaces. And I'll run through with you all what specifically we do. What was this? Not going. So our annual exam key components. So not only are we using recommendations from American Cancer Society and the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, we also take into account the NFPA 1582. So when they come on the vehicles, you are getting a comprehensive history and physical exam, full lab testing. We're doing a mental health screening, a sleep health screening, hormone health screening, as well as hearing and vision. Heart health, you do an EKG on the vehicle. We do a pulmonary function test on the vehicle, and then cancer screening. So all of these things are happening on the vehicle. For cancer screenings, here are the recommendations, and we don't have to go at length with them, but we are doing the blood draws, and then anything that we see that may be abnormal, we refer for follow-up. And then obviously referring for things like colonoscopies, mammograms, that can't be done on the vehicle. But the biggest thing with having the vehicles go to the firefighters, doing their annual physicals with them, is the continuity of care. So they're part of the U-Health system, and whether it be cancer screening that they have to have, or, they have to see a cardiologist, or, whatever it is, they're able to get that done, and it happens very fast. So they may see us on a Monday. By the following Monday, they're seeing whoever they're referred to. On the tables, you'll see we've created a health screening passport. So again, firefighters saying, I went to my doctor, he had no idea that there was anything that I'm at a higher risk because I'm a firefighter. And, what do I tell them? Well, we have this, and this is on the digital form in the toolkit. The front page has information from the IARC monograph of why firefighters are at a higher risk, that they are considered a group 1 carcinogen, including the cancers that they're at a higher incidence for. And then on the back shows what screening should be done and at what age. And so there's a male version and a female version that are floating around. Here's just a few pictures of our education. Again, these are things that are shared when they're coming to us on the mobile clinic. So not only are the exams tailored to them, but you're working with clinicians who only see firefighters. So those conversations are very tailored to what their needs are. Other thing that we've been doing the last couple years is training other providers. So as I mentioned, some providers may have any idea that firefighters are at increased risk. So, holding grand rounds and teaching clinicians not only in our network within the U-Health system, but also community clinicians, and teaching them things that they should be asking specifically to occupation. Lastly is our nurse navigation program, and this is something that is not just for local people in the state of Florida. Anyone can call our 243-FIRE. If you got diagnosed with cancer, or someone in your department gets diagnosed, or have any questions about screening, you can call. Again, we're part of the NCI Designated Cancer Center Network, so we're not saying, oh, come to Florida, you have to come to Florida, but you may say, I live in San Antonio and I don't know what to do, where do I go? We have close colleagues at Mays Cancer Institute, or, I have a colleague who was diagnosed with cancer and they live in Georgia. What can we do? We have connections at Emory and Winship Cancer Center. And so we've built this network that we're not the only ones working in cancer or firefighter cancer research, but making it known within all the cancer centers that it is an issue. How we can help navigate that, is our goal. And lastly is leadership, and really it's just how we can stay connected. We have monthly seminars online. We've now moved our annual Fire Service Cancer Symposium. We're doing it every other year, and the years in between we just do a virtual summit. But yeah, that is it. You can scan that. That takes you to our website. Any questions you have, and open to any questions you have now. And here's my contact information. Thank you.